Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Crimson by me, the Tiger Woods. Yeah, I'm Ty. Ty's there, and he's super fancy. Today we're doing chapter 22. What does Zach's death have to do with engineering? Andrew asked, picking up on the least relevant part, Alex thought. It's what killed him, Alex answered as he indicated where the two men Anders had brought with him to sit. I thought it was faulty valve or something, filled his room with poison, and locked him in there. The door locks are also part of the system, the engineering processor controls. It turns all the time, it doesn't mean Anders, Alex snapped. I don't have time for this. Once it's all over, I'll spend the hours needed answering all your questions, but right now I need you out of here. The men bristled and Alex took a breath. Look, I'm grateful you found me two programmers, but now I need to show them what I expect of them. That's going to take longer than I'd like, and someone else might die during that time. So I really need to get back to work. You have your oxygen? And took the canister to at his back and showed it to Alex. Good. If you want to do something to help, go around and make sure no one is in a room that can be locked and that everyone has their oxygen. I have no way to know what the processor will do once I start, so everyone needs to be prepared. Alex saw anger in the man's eyes for a moment, but he nodded and laughed. I don't know how much I'll be able to help. The man seated to the left of where Alex was standing said, I tried to tell Anders, but I don't really know code. I dabble in game building, that's about it. Dennis, right? Dennis Armitage. Alex thought for a moment. Can you read code? Sure. Anyone can do that if you spend long enough looking at it. Alex moved to the central console. His console, the one he'd upgraded with 4 calorie system connected together. Okay, this is sufficiently clunky. I'm going to have to adjust that. He moved to the central console. His console. Okay. This is more structured than anything else. The one he'd upgraded with 4 calorie system connected together, that gave him almost as much power as the processor had. The auxiliary station only had one, since they only acted as backup. Alex had added a third station, a temporary one, behind this. I'm giving you watch-only access. Your job is going to keep track of what life support does. Try to predict where it's going to dump coolant and make sure no one's there. You weren't kidding? Zach's death wasn't an accident? Dennis, I already told Anders we don't have the time. You can sit on it. You can sit in on the explanation later. Get familiar with the code. Luigi? He turned to the other man. Yep. How are your programming skills? Rusty. I haven't used them in years, but I went through the full course. I had to quit weeks before the end of the year. Sorry to hear that, Alex said, setting up the main console for full access. Family emergencies? Emergency? The seer snorted. We burned down this teacher's house. Alex looked up. She deserved it. She was just a pretentious bitch. You burned down her house because you didn't like her? Alex didn't believe the length someone would go to. I killed the bitch. Burning down her house was just so the others would know not to mess with me. Alex gasped, then decided this was a subject best ignored. I'm sending you my own program arsenal. Get comfortable with them. Because your job is going to be detecting anything I change. The system is going to do its best to undo my work. You have a headset. It's the best I can do for you. Turned to the woman seated behind him. Seer, you know your job. Shadow you. Watch your back. Keep the system from attacking your connection directly. If you see anything coming you can't deal with, tell me. This isn't a test. It's our lives. That goes for both of you. If you can't handle something for whatever reason, shout. I wish I thought to ask Anders to find you two earlier, because we really need weeks to figure out how to work together. But this is the situation we're in. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. What about asking the universe for help? His mother's words came back to him. The universe doesn't give a damn about you. You don't matter to it. So Better learn to handle your own problems. Well, he was going to handle this. Will, where are you? He called him to come. Coming, was the answer. And a moment later, his friend entered the room with energy bars and drinks for everyone. Will, your job is to keep us stocked with bars and drinks. There's no way to know how long this is going to last. We could get lucky and be out of here in an hour, or we could be here for 2 days. We won't be able to leave our stations until this is all done. So I hope none of us are wearing their best pants. Will do. Will answered. Days? Dennis asked. Potentially. Once they start, we can't stop. I better go deal with something. Alex nodded. Hurry up. The man ran out. Oxygen, Will said, indicating canister at Alex's feet. Thanks. So Asir and Luigi had theirs, noted for Dennis to grab his as he came back a few minutes later. Took out his earpiece and placed it down on the console. He wouldn't be using it this time. He hadn't done code-only coercion since leaving school. His teacher had always joked that Alex would prefer talking the system into submission and coding it there, but he couldn't talk the system. Like had healed his eardrum, but Alex had no doubt he'd suffer the same fate if he tried again. Didn't know if it was a defense mechanism or just a sign of its insanity, but that scream would still be there. He was sure of it. Okay, I'm ready, people. We're about to go to war. Okay, get ready, people. We're about to go to war. I'm ready, Asir said. There, Luigi replied. Alex looked at Dennis and then seemed to feel the gaze and turned. Do I have a choice? Not really. Sorry. The man nodded, squared his shoulder, and faced the display. I'm ready, then. Alex sent the thought to Jack, wherever he was, incessantly when his face had Tristan's hard eyes in his mind. Push that away. He couldn't afford a distraction. To survive this, he'd see Jack eventually and deal with Tristan. He began coding. His plan was to isolate life support. It had been simple enough to do it the first time, but then that processor hadn't been using it as a weapon. This wouldn't be so easy. He worked slowly, trying his best not to attract the engineering processor's attention while he looked for life support components. He wished he could have brought the core processor into this, and a fourth backup would have been good. But the engineering system were the second most powerful on the ship, and if those two talked, Alex wasn't confident the core processor would keep from being overwhelmed by the insanity. Hours passed while he tagged the pieces of code as belonging to life support. The engineering processor had completely dismantled it, spread the code about. It kept everything working, but Alex couldn't fix this by quickly walling off chunks of code. There are a lot of antibodies about, Asir said. Alex looked about and saw what she had. Something had noticed this tagging. They weren't swarming it, but they didn't consider it a threat. But if they noticed him, all bets were off. Tried to come up with a quick way to resolve this once he tagged every part of the system, but couldn't. He'd have to build the walls and then transfer the code there. Luigi, find a quiet part of the network and wall it off. There's going to be a program to help you with that. Yep, got it. Working on it. Everything's good here, Dennis said. It won't last long, Alex thought. Walls up. Alex had to make a choice. He could continue tagging and hope the antibodies wouldn't become aware of him until he had everything. But if they did become aware, the system would know what he was targeting and act to keep that out of his reach. Or he could start moving what he considered a critical part behind the wall now and hope it would be sufficient to reduce the processor's ability to hurt them enough they could keep going. Something's happening, Asir said. But trust now. Set the coolant controls behind the wall and left quick and dirty code behind it in the hopes that would fool the antibodies for a while. It's got your connection, Asir yelled with a curse. Alex went on the defensive, taking down the barricade that was coming up around him. Then he spoke, first in soft, calm tone. Alex tuned him out. Luigi cursed, but no alarm there either. It's blocking the other connections. Mine's still good, Luigi said. Fuck, I don't know how long that's going to last. Alex was discovering that human voices weren't the same as system sound. He trained to work through the latter. This was proving a strain. He wanted to tell them to shut up, but they needed to communicate with him and each other, so he'd have to learn to deal with it. The best way was to give them less to talk about, so he had to make himself the larger problem. He could do this. The system was fast, but it was still just a system, bound bound by its programming. Alex didn't have any programming dictating his action, so he could do the unexpected. With a malicious grin, he unleashed every program he'd ever designed on the system, then used the confusion to attack the processor itself. Forget cutting it out. Forget dumbing it down. Alex was going to alter its personality directly, impose his will on the damn thing. He heard someone laughing, but it sounded a little unhinged. He was the one laughing. He was banging on the door. Put your mask on, Dennis said. Alex looked to his feet, but the canister wasn't there. He kicked it away. He didn't have the time to worry about it. The system had figured out where they were, couldn't cut the power, it seemed to that, so it was going to cut off the air. How long did he have? A quick glance around told him the other three had theirs on, so one person in the room this side. There was enough air for a while. Right? Was that enough? How the hell was he supposed to know? He gave up on the system and went after the door lock. That was what the bang was about. Will on the other side of the door. If he could open it, he'd have air. Found it quickly, wrapped a layer after layer of code to keep him out. He found it quickly, wrapped layer after layer of code to keep him out, in making sure okay, what was I going for here? Let's or to keep it out. Oh no, okay. Oh, okay, got it. Oops. Okay, got it. Back. Okay. He found it quickly, wrapped. Okay. Wrapped in layer after layer of code. Designed to keep him out. But in doing that, the system had shone a spotlight on it. That's a little cleaner. Alex dove in, dissecting code with abandon. The banging intensified. Alex didn't care. Stranded code flew about. He was getting through. Yes! He was in. But there was nothing there. Alex stared at the empty space. Not a single line of code. He'd been tricked. How much hair had he used to get through that? He didn't know. Forced himself to go back on the hunt. It had to be around there somewhere. Searched and found nothing. So he glanced at the earpiece and thought about putting it on just so he could scream his frustration at the system. What happened when he ran out of air? The thought popped up unbidden. Was it like drowning? Would he convulse? It was a good thing he didn't know how close he was to that. Made it easier to ignore. He almost stopped coding when something slipped over his face. Then he smiled at him. Luigi said you're more important than me. He's right. Things have gone to shit everywhere on the ship. Might as well just sit back and wait for you to save us. Took the canister to Alex's belt. Alex nodded. He no longer had to worry about suffocating, in the short run at least. The oxygen canister gave him 12 hours of air, but without a refill, he was back to being in trouble. He counted on Will to bring them fresh ones. First, he needed to unlock that door. He couldn't He couldn't just let the system beat him. He had unlocked. That was the code. That was code. He wrote a quick search program with parameters to look for any code that locked something, and he made it so that it would look at every code, even hidden one. Then he copied this replicator program a dozen times and gave it that code. Within seconds, thousands of search programs were loose in the system. He wrote another program and set it aside. As he expected, the antibodies went after his search program, but he knew how to put that to a stop. He went back to attacking the processor, but it tried to stop the search when something more dangerous was going on. And just tried to hide the lock from the bastard. Well, as he fought to change code faster than the antibodies could fix them, he saw something change color in the distance. In the distance. Once his search program had found something, another dot of color. One of his search programs had found something, another dot of color in a different section, then another, and more of them all over the place. There were a lot of locks on this ship. Continued paying attention as he attacked the processor. The rate of change in color slowed as there remained fewer and fewer locks to find. When it stopped, Alex waited 10 seconds to make sure there were nothing left. He then gave a second program to the replicator and watched it spread. It was a simple program, one line of code that translated to unlock. He heard people burst into the room and gave up his attack against the processor to go back to finding and walling off the life support code. He saw Jennifer go through Dennis, well past his field of vision, quickly vanishing. Voices he didn't recognize complained, but he ignored them. He was on the clock now more than ever. He'd unlocked the oxygen. But what else had he unlocked? Had he released the code ship-wide? There was a reason a ship like this usually had specialized programmers. Alex had no idea what kind of damage his actions might have caused again. Just had to hope the captain would still like him when this was all over. He really didn't want to be spaced. Alex knew time passed because someone changed the oxygen chemistry. His progress was slow. The system fought hard to keep control of each of the life support code. Each of the life support code segments. His progress was slow. It's like the system fought hard to keep control of each of the life support code segment Alex went after, but Alex consistently won those fights. Alex didn't realize he was done until Asir pulled his hand away from the board. He looked up at her, she nodded, and exhaustion took him away. This concludes chapter 22 of Crimson. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one is going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read more of it, it and the other books in the series are available on all major retailers. You can get them from my website. Link is in the note. If you want to support me, Patreon link is in the note. And from there, you can get access to many, many more stories I have written. And if you want to watch me fumble my way through these live, I do that on Twitch every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Rest of the week, I write. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.